Welcome once again to the Armory. In this second episode, we're going to be laying down some of those first hammer blows to turn those shapeless sheets into our Medieval Great Helm. I'm Joel Hunter, this is my workshop, and let's get stuck into that process. Before we get into any kind of shaping work, we want to make sure we have a framework to guide our efforts. This is our former, a 3D blueprint that reflects the dimensions of the original helmet. Before the time of the Great Helm, knights wore nasal helms, which slowly and gradually evolved into the Great Helm that we see here. This is because back in those times, the craftsmen didn't have access to the larger pieces of steel without inclusions that we have today, and so the helmets were riveted together from multiple plates of steel. Later in the 14th century, it was worn over another helmet known as a bassinet, but its final evolution would become the distinct frog-mouth tilting helmet of the 15th century. So, here's the former that we've made, ready to help us shape the four plates, the main plates of this helmet. And what's great about having a former is that it allows us to match our plates to the same dimensions and proportions that the original template and the original helmet has. It kind of acts as like a skeleton to help us to get the shape exactly right, and helps us to take the guesswork out of whether or not we've got any warp or twist in the plates as we're working them. Now that we have this, we can get on to hammer rolling the plates for this helmet. The technique that we're using to match these flat pieces of steel to the former is called hammer rolling. So basically, what that means, so I need to start that take again. Essentially what that is using a profiled face hammer, in this case a cross pin or a raising hammer, to run consistent passes along the inside of the plate, causing that steel to roll around and become a curved plate. And it leaves all these little hammer marks on the inside, and if you do it nice and consistently and evenly, it'll give you a consistent curve and add a subtle bit of curvature across the horizontal axis of the plate. Ooh, that's a tight fit. Sits well, not too tight, not stretched, just fits just nicely. That's what we want. Part of the process with getting a good exact match is there's a bit of back and forwards involved in putting shape into the piece. Sometimes you overshoot that mark, then you've got to take a little bit of shape out by planishing from the outside, as you saw earlier, to release that shape and allow it to open back out again. And it's all about identifying where in the piece do I want to put that curvature? Where do I want that shape to come from? I'm going to put that shape in there. Oops, I overshot the mark. Bit of a bummer. Take that shape out, get it closer to what we need exactly. So you're going to see a lot of that as the process keeps going forwards. Not only does the hammer rolling create the curve we need, it's also strengthening the metal in the process called work hardening. Interestingly, the steel used to make helmets at this time in history would have been worked and stretched before it was shaped into the helmet. However, in this modern age, since we will be working the sides of the helmet cold to its final form, it's important to work the metal, instead of bending it, to replicate a similar strength. This is different to hardening, which requires steel of a higher carbon content and uses quenching in water or oil to change the structure at a molecular level. Trying to check for any kind of bumps or irregularities in the surface of the steel. Because one of the things you want in good armor is for it to flow, for it to be a smooth, continuous flow across the piece. And you might look at that in the light and go, that looks like a pretty good curve, but running your hand over it just slightly, you can feel any kind of inconsistencies or bumps in the surface. One of the key characteristic features of this helmet is that hard centerline crease that defines the front of this helmet. Not only does it provide a really key aesthetic detail, but it also provides much needed strength and rigidity. The crease is put in using a chisel and refined on the creasing stake from the outside to sharpen and crisp it up. We want to make sure that both sides of our steel match the curves on either side of the former, because when we put the crease into the center of the helmet, at that point it will bend at the crease, and that's where we're going to get our change in direction that will then bring the two sides together so that it matches exactly up to the former how we need it to. Straight, even creases are a marker of a good and quality armourer. Just take some time and use light hammer blows and just true those lines up and get them nice and crisp. Alright, so all of our main plates have been shaped and all of them match up to our template that we have here. Now we have to put them all together to form the body of the helmet. So we can start to align them and match their edges up to get our seams and drill in all the holes required to hold the rivets that pull the helmet together and create a single piece. First up, the edges of the plates are checked for square and trimmed, and the corners are taken off. Next, the overlap is marked and the holes for the sides are drilled. First in 1/8 and then in 3/16. It's important to level off the top of the helmet at this stage of the process in preparation for the top plate. Using a nice level and even surface, we're able to check for highs and lows and get a nice even edge around that entire bottom section of the helmet. top is now assembled, and now it's time to crack out that torch and do some smackification. Hell yeah! Taking care to make sure all your seams are tight, consistent and gap-free is the mark of excellence and producing the best quality product. Attention to detail in these areas is what gives value and quality to the work. Good work not only looks good on the battlefield, but its quality is just as high under the magnifying glass. The lower plates are now matched to the top. Heat and clamps are used to seal the seam of the back plates together. And finally, the front plate is matched to the rest. Last, the bottom line of the helmet is trimmed. This must be even and pleasing to the eye as it underlines the entire helmet and adds to its overall personality. Now the curves are in place and the lines are set, and we can begin to see the first glimpse of the final helmet. Well guys, we have a finished helmet. Oh yeah, not quite, because I can't actually see out of this bloody thing. But what we do have is the basic shape of what our helmet's going to look like. We have put some nice neat lines and excellent proportions into some flat steel, and now we're ready to make that top plate that sits right on top here. So, as every plate is being forged and put into place, we are getting closer and closer to our final goal.